Through the winding corridors of Outpost Epsilon 9, Commander Rick O'Gorman made his way with practiced ease. The remote research station orbited a gas giant in the Proxima Centauri system, far from Earth's watchful eyes, the perfect place for experimental research that might raise eyebrows back home. The station's environmental controls were acting up again, making the normally cool corridors uncomfortably warm. "Another day in paradise," he muttered, running a hand through his dark hair. The standard-issue combat uniform he wore left his arms exposed, a practical choice given the station's temperamental climate control. Though he couldn't help but notice how the female staff, both human and alien, seemed to appreciate the view. Rick had been stationed at Epsilon 9 for 6 months now, assigned as Earth's military liaison to the Joint Research Project. The Galactic Alliance had insisted on human oversight for this particular venture, something about ensuring ethical protocols. In reality, it was just politics. Humans were the new kids on the galactic block, and everyone wanted to keep tabs on them. He paused at a doorway marked Xenobiological Augmentation Lab and pressed his palm against the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss. "Dr. Kira, you called for assistance," he called out, stepping into the laboratory. The lab was a marvel of alien technology, sleek consoles with holographic displays, equipment that defied Earth's understanding of physics. And in the center of it all stood Dr. Leona Kira, the station's lead xenobiologist. She turned at the sound of his voice, her bright azure eyes widening slightly. Leona was a Thry, a humanoid species with smooth violet skin that seemed to shimmer under the lab's lights. Her long white hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, though a few strands had escaped to frame her delicate face. The brown scientific uniform she wore hugged her curves in a way that made Rick momentarily forget his professional demeanor. "Commander O'Gorman," she said, her melodic voice carrying a hint of an accent. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I need assistance calibrating this new equipment." She gestured to what looked like a futuristic remote control sitting on the table. Rick approached the workstation where Leona stood. "What seems to be the problem?" "The Galactic Council sent this prototype device for our research," she explained. "It's designed to temporarily alter cellular structures for medical purposes, but the instructions are incomplete." Rick picked up the device, turning it over in his hands. It was lighter than it looked, with a series of unmarked buttons and a small display screen. No labels. "That seems like poor design." Leona's lips curved into a smile. "The Council believes in intuitive interfaces. Unfortunately, human and Thry intuition differ significantly." "So what do you need me to do?" Rick asked, still examining the device. "I need you to hold it steady while I connect it to our main system for programming," Leona said, reaching for a cable. "Just don't press any." Too late. Rick's thumb had already pressed a small blue button on the side of the device. A soft hum filled the air, and a beam of pale light shot out, enveloping Leona for a brief moment. "Buttons," she finished, her voice suddenly higher-pitched. The light faded, and Rick looked up from the device to apologize, only for the words to die in his throat. Leona stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock and mortification as her already generous chest began to expand beneath her uniform. The fabric strained visibly, seams creaking in protest as her bust grew to absolutely incredible proportions in a matter of seconds. What did you do?" Leona gasped, her violet skin darkening with what Rick recognized as a Thry blush. Her hands flew to her chest, running over the newly enhanced curves in disbelief. Rick stared at the device in his hand, then back at Leona. I think I found the cellular alteration function." Leona's blush deepened to an almost indigo shade. "Commander O'Gorman, this is not amusing." She tried to cross her arms over her chest, but the new dimensions made the gesture impossible. A precarious position for both a military commander and a respected xenobiologist, Rick realized. And somehow, he had a feeling this was just the beginning of what would prove to be a very interesting day at Outpost Epsilon 9. Rick bit his lip, fighting back the grin that threatened to break across his face. "I'm sorry, Dr. Kira, it was an accident." He looked down at the device again. "There must be a reverse button on this thing." "There better be," Leona hissed, still trying to adjust her uniform to accommodate her new proportions. "The department heads are meeting in 2 hours, and I cannot attend looking like you've been significantly upgraded," Rick suggested, unable to keep the amusement from his voice. Leona shot him a glare that could have melted steel. "This is precisely why humans have a reputation for immaturity. Just fix it." Rick cleared his throat, trying to focus on the device rather than on Leona's transformed figure. "Right, let's see." He began pressing different buttons, but nothing seemed to happen. "Stop," Leona grabbed his wrist. "You might make it worse. We need to understand how it works first." "Do you have the technical specifications anywhere?" Rick asked, setting the device down carefully. Leona nodded, moving to a console. Her movement caused her enhanced assets to bounce dramatically, and she winced, placing a steadying hand against them. "This is so humiliating," she muttered. "Look on the bright side," Rick said, following her to the console. "At least no one else was here to see it happen." Just then, the lab door slid open. "Dr. Kira, I was wondering if you had finished the analysis of—" Dr. Krell, the station's Aruan physician, stopped mid-sentence. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he took in Leona's transformed appearance. "This isn't what it looks like," Leona said quickly. Dr. Krell's mouth opened and closed several times before he simply backed out of the room, the door sliding shut behind him. Rick turned to Leona with a grimace. That could have gone better. Leona sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "By tomorrow, everyone on the station will know about this." Rick placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not if we fix it before then. Come on, Dr. Kira. We're 2 of the smartest people on this station. We can figure this out." She looked up at him, her bright azure eyes meeting his for a moment. Something passed between them, a connection deeper than their usual professional courtesy. "You're right," she said finally. "And please, under the circumstances, I think you can call me Leona." "All right, Leona," Rick said with a smile. "Let's get to work, and for what it's worth, I really am sorry about this." Leona's lips curved into a reluctant smile. "I know you are, Rick, though I suspect part of you is rather pleased with your handiwork." Rick felt heat rise to his face. That would be unprofessional." "Indeed it would," Leona agreed, her smile growing slightly. "Now, let's figure out how to undo your unprofessional mistake before anyone else sees me like this." As they bent over the console together, Rick couldn't help but think that this bizarre accident might just be the beginning of something neither of them had anticipated. The technical specifications scrolled across the holographic display, a mix of standard galactic script and more obscure scientific notation. "This is useless," Leona exclaimed, pushing away from the console with frustration. They'd spent 30 minutes combing through the technical specifications of the device, but the documentation was incomplete at best and deliberately obscure at worst. Rick rubbed his eyes, feeling the strain of staring at alien text. The Galactic Council really doesn't want anyone understanding how this thing works, do they? "It's classified technology," Leona admitted, absently adjusting her uniform again. Her enhanced chest made every movement a challenge. "Only a handful of scientists have clearance to know its full capabilities." "And you're not one of them?" Rick asked, raising an eyebrow. Leona shot him a look. "I'm merely testing its medical applications, not reverse engineering it." She stood up, wincing as her movement caused another bounce. "This is ridiculous. I can barely move." Rick tried to keep his eyes at a respectful level, but failed miserably. The sight of Leona's dramatically enhanced figure was simply too distracting. Her brown scientific uniform, normally loose in the chest area, now strained against her new proportions, the neckline dipping dangerously low. A sudden alert chimed from the console, making them both jump. The station's AI spoke in its characteristically neutral tone. Reminder, department heads meeting commencing in 90 minutes. All section leaders required to attend. Leona groaned. We're running out of time. If we can't fix this before the meeting. She trailed off, the implications clear. Rick squared his shoulders, determination setting in. He was a military commander, trained to handle crisis situations. This might not be the type of crisis he'd prepared for, but the principles were the same. Assess the situation, identify possible solutions, and act decisively. Then we better work faster, he said, picking up the device again. And Leona, whatever happens, we're in this together. The station's lighting dimmed to its night cycle setting, casting the lab in a soft blue glow. Most of the crew had retired to their quarters, leaving the research wing eerily quiet. Rick glanced at the time display, 2:37 Station Standard Time. They'd been working for hours with little progress. Coffee, he offered, holding out a steaming mug to Leona. He'd made a quick trip to the mess hall, returning with provisions for what was clearly going to be an all-nighter. Leona accepted the mug gratefully, her fingers brushing against his. Thank you, though I'm not sure how much more technical documentation I can read before my eyes start bleeding. Rick chuckled, pulling up a chair beside her. He discarded his undershirt hours ago when the environmental controls had malfunctioned again, leaving the lab uncomfortably warm. Now clad only in his standard-issue military pants, he was acutely aware of Leona's occasional glances at his bare torso. We've been approaching this all wrong, he said, taking a sip of his own coffee. We're trying to understand alien technology using human and Thry logic. Leona raised an eyebrow. And what would you suggest instead? Let's think about who designed this thing. The Galactic Council is primarily composed of Arcturians and Salarians, right? Their approach to technology is fundamentally different from ours. Leona nodded slowly, setting down her mug. She'd removed Rick's tactical vest earlier, finding it too cumbersome for detailed work. Now she'd modified her uniform by fashioning a makeshift support from some spare fabric, which helped but didn't completely solve her predicament. Arcturians view technology as an extension of biological processes, she mused, and Salarians are obsessed with symmetry and balance. Rick snapped his fingers. Exactly. So what if the device doesn't have a simple undo function? What if it's designed to create equilibrium? Leona's bright azure eyes widened with understanding. You think it's not about revering the effect, but balancing it with something else. Worth a shot, Rick said, picking up the device again, though I'm not sure what the balancing factor would be. Leona stood and paced the lab, her enhanced figure swaying with each step. Rick tried not to stare, but the sight was mesmerizing. She seemed lost in thought, muttering to herself in her native Thry language, a melodic stream of sounds that reminded Rick of flowing water. In Arcturian medicine, she finally said, turning back to him, they believe in the principle of reciprocal transformation. To heal one part of the body, you must first understand its relationship to other parts. Rick stood, excitement building. So the device might need to understand what it's balancing against. It needs a reference point, a baseline. Yes, Leona exclaimed. It needs to scan an unaltered body to understand what normal looks like for my species. Do we have any other Thry on the station who could serve as a reference? Rick asked. Leona shook her head. I'm the only one, but... She hesitated, a blush darkening her violet skin. The device has already scanned me once. It might have stored my original parameters. Rick examined the device more carefully. There's some kind of memory function here. These symbols look like storage units. He pressed a sequence of buttons, and the small screen displayed what appeared to be a three-dimensional model of Leona before the enhancement. That's it. Leona moved closer, leaning over his shoulder to see. Her proximity sent a wave of warmth through Rick's body. It stored my original cellular structure. So we just need to tell it to revert to the stored template, Rick said, his voice slightly husky from her nearness. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The soft blue lighting cast shadows across Leona's features, highlighting the delicate curve of her cheekbones and the fullness of her lips. Rick, Leona said softly, not moving away, there's something I should tell you about Thrive physiology. What's that? He asked, equally quiet. Our emotional states affect our physical responses much more dramatically than in humans. When we're attracted to someone, certain physiological changes occur. Rick swallowed. Like what? Leona's blush deepened. Our skin becomes more sensitive to touch, our body temperature rises, and our pheromone production increases significantly. Are you saying? Rick began, hardly daring to believe what she was implying. I'm saying that I've been experiencing these changes since we started working together tonight, Leona admitted. And I believe you've been responding to my pheromones, even if you weren't consciously aware of it. Rick's heart raced. Is that why I haven't been able to stop thinking about how beautiful you are, even in the middle of this crisis? The sudden blare of an alarm shattered the moment. The lab's emergency lights flashed red as the station's AI announced. Warning! Unauthorized energy signature detected in Laboratory 7. Security teams have been notified. Rick and Leona sprang apart as heavy footsteps echoed. The lab door slid open with a hiss, and Admiral Harrison strode in, followed by a security team. His stern face darkened at the sight before him. Commander O'Gorman shirtless, Dr. Kira's uniform in disarray, and the unauthorized device glowing ominously between them. Would either of you care to explain what's going on here? The Admiral demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. Rick stepped forward, instinctively positioning himself between Leona and the security team. Sir, we're attempting to resolve an equipment malfunction. A malfunction that triggered every security sensor in this wing. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Dr. Kira, your condition appears to have worsened since Dr. Krell's report. Leona straightened her spine, professional dignity warring with obvious embarrassment. The cellular manipulation effect has stabilized, Admiral. Commander O'Gorman and I believe we've identified a solution. You have exactly 5 minutes to demonstrate this solution, Admiral Harrison said, checking his chronometer. After that, I'm shutting down this lab and reporting this incident to the Galactic Council. Rick and Leona exchanged glances. 5 minutes to solve a problem they'd been wrestling with for hours. But something had changed between them, a newfound understanding that went beyond mere professional cooperation. The stored template, Rick said quietly. We need to activate it while simultaneously engaging the reciprocal transformation protocol. Leona nodded, her fingers flying over the device's controls. The Arcturian balance principle, if we can synchronize both functions. In standard English, please, the Admiral interrupted. Sir, Rick explained, the device works on principles of equilibrium. It stored Dr. Kira's original cellular structure before the accident. We believe we can use that as a reference point to reverse the effects. The security team shifted nervously as the device began to hum, its glow intensifying. Leona's violet skin had taken on an almost luminescent quality, whether from stress or her earlier admitted attraction to Rick, he couldn't tell. Ready, he asked, positioning the device. Leona took a deep breath. Ready, initiating sequence now. The device pulsed, bathing Leona in a swirling array of colors. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy as the transformation began. Rick held the device steady, acutely aware that one wrong move could make things catastrophically worse. "Cellular reversion at 30%, Leona reported, her voice strained. 50%, 70. The security team's weapons hummed to life, ready for any sign of danger. Admiral Harrison watched with barely concealed anxiety as the process continued. 90%, Leona's voice faltered. "Something's wrong, the template's destabilizing." Rick acted on instinct. He dropped the device and grabbed Leona's hands, ignoring the startled shouts from the security team. The moment their skin made contact, a jolt of energy passed between them. "Your emotional state affects your physical responses," he said urgently. "Focus on me, focus on us." Leona's bright eyes met his, understanding dawning. The Thry's natural ability to channel emotional energy into physical changes, it wasn't just about attraction. It was the key they'd been missing. The device's glow intensified one final time, then faded. When the light cleared, Leona stood before them, restored to her original proportions. Her uniform, though disheveled, no longer strained at the seams. "It worked," she breathed, a smile breaking across her face. Admiral Harrison cleared his throat. "I see you've managed to resolve the immediate crisis. However, this incident raises serious questions about protocol and supervision of experimental technology." "Sir," Rick began, but the Admiral held up a hand. "Save it, Commander. I want full reports from both of you by 800, and that device is to be secured in the high-security vault until the Council representatives arrive." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Commander, put on a shirt." As the security team filed out, Rick and Leona found themselves alone again. The tension of the past few hours began to dissipate, replaced by something else. A mix of relief, exhaustion, and unresolved attraction. "So," Rick said, retrieving his discarded shirt, "about what you were saying earlier regarding Thry physiological responses." Leona's skin darkened with a blush. "Perhaps we should continue that discussion somewhere more private, after we finish our reports, of course." "Of course," Rick agreed, a smile tugging at his lips. "We wouldn't want to be unprofessional." The device sat silent on the lab table, its screen displaying a message neither of them noticed. "Pair bonding protocol initiated. Phase 1 complete." The next morning found Rick and Leona in the station's observation lounge, surrounded by hovering holographic displays as they worked on their reports. The gas giant they orbited filled the massive viewport, its swirling storms creating a hypnotic backdrop to their work. "I still can't believe we have to document every single button press," Rick grumbled, scrolling through pages of technical data. "The Admiral's really making us pay for last night's excitement." Leona looked up from her own work, amusement dancing in her bright eyes. "Would you prefer I included the part about your shirtless problem-solving approach?" "I think we can leave that detail out," Rick chuckled, then paused as he noticed something odd in the data. "Hey, take a look at this." Leona moved closer, her shoulder brushing against his as she leaned in to examine his display. The contact sent a familiar warmth through both of them, but there was something different about it now, more intense, more focused. "These energy readings," she said, frowning. "They're not consistent with standard cellular manipulation technology. Could it be a malfunction in the monitoring systems?" Leona shook her head, pulling up additional data on her own display. "No, look at the pattern. The device wasn't just altering physical structures, it was creating some kind of persistent energy field." "A field that's still active?" Rick asked, suddenly alert. "Yes, but not in the way you might think." Leona manipulated the holographic display, highlighting a series of complex waveforms. It's subtle, but there's a definite resonance between our biosignatures. The device didn't just scan us, it linked us somehow. Rick sat back, processing this information. Is that why I can sense you more clearly now? I thought it was just heightened awareness after last night's events. Leona's violet skin darkened slightly. It's more than that. Thry can naturally form empathic bonds, but they typically take months or years to develop. This feels similar, but it's happening much faster. Should we be concerned? I don't know. Leona bit her lip, a gesture Rick found increasingly endearing. The device's primary function was supposed to be medical. Perhaps this is some kind of healing protocol. Before Rick could respond, the observation lounge door slid open. Dr. Krell entered, his 4 eyes widening slightly at the sight of them together. "Ah, Commander, Doctor," he said, mandibles clicking nervously. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," Leona assured him. "What can we help you with?" "Well, after yesterday's incident, I took the liberty of analyzing the device's energy signature." He projected his own data set into the air. "And I found something rather fascinating." Rick and Leona exchanged glances as Dr. Krell continued. "The technology appears to be based on ancient Arcturian bonding rituals. They used similar devices to create permanent partnerships between compatible individuals." "Permanent," Rick echoed. "Oh, yes," Dr. Krell said enthusiastically. "The process typically begins with a physical transformation, followed by the establishment of a psychic link. The final stage involves complete cellular harmonization between the partners." Leona's hand found Rick's under the table. "And what happens during this harmonization?" "Quite remarkable, actually. The partners become perfectly attuned to each other's physical and emotional states. In some cases, they even develop the ability to share thoughts and memories." Dr. Krell paused, noting their expressions. "But surely you've already noticed some of these effects." Rick thought about the growing awareness he had of Leona's presence, the way he could sense her emotions more clearly with each passing hour. "You could say that." "Fascinating," Dr. Krell exclaimed. "A human-Thry bond would be unprecedented. The research possibilities alone." "Doctor," Leona interrupted firmly, "I trust this information will remain confidential for now." Of course," Dr. Krell assured them, backing toward the door. "Though you might want to prepare for some questions. The energy signature is quite distinctive, and well." He gestured vaguely at the space between them, where a faint shimmer was now visible in the air. After he left, Rick and Leona sat in silence for a moment, watching the ethereal light dance between them. "So," Rick finally said, "not just a medical device after all." "No," Leona agreed softly. "Are you concerned about this development?" Rick turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. The contact intensified the connection between them, filling his mind with impressions of her thoughts and feelings, curiosity, anxiety, and underneath it all, a deep and growing affection. "Concerned isn't the word I'd use," he said with a smile. "Intrigued, maybe. Excited, definitely." Relief and joy flowed through their developing bond. "The Admiral isn't going to be happy about this," Leona pointed out, though she couldn't keep the happiness from her voice. "The Admiral isn't happy about anything," Rick countered, pulling her closer. "Besides, I think we have more interesting things to focus on right now." The gas giant storms continued their eternal dance outside the viewport, unaware that within the station, 2 beings from different worlds were embarking on their own cosmic dance, one that would reshape their understanding of both science and love.